In the past few videos, we've been discussing the income statement or profit and loss statement, whereby you are able to find out how much gross profit, gross income your practice made, every dollar that was paid to you. And then it's an itemized list of all of the expenses that you had, everyone else that you had to pay just to keep the doors open and the lights on. And then you see at the bottom the net income, or what you were able to either take home personally or profit that was left over in the business. What I want to do in the next couple of videos is start to develop some strategies for improving your profitability, increasing your net income. Now, since this sheet follows a very simple formula, gross income minus expenses equals net income, that means that our strategies for improving our net income are very straightforward as well. To improve our net income, we can just increase our gross income, just bring more dollars into the practice. Or we can decrease our expenses. Now, that may seem very simple, but the strategies for how you specifically do that in your practice become a little more complicated. So let's dig in. So first, increasing gross income. We can do that a couple of ways. One is to increase our production. We can just produce more dentistry. If we produce more dentistry in a given day, then we'll be increasing our gross income, right? Well, there's a couple ways we can do that. One is to increase our fees. So actually doing the same amount of production, but increasing the profitability of that production, we can just increase our fees. Now, that's a very complicated subject. Are you not charging enough for your fees, or some of your fees, are you undercharging? Perhaps in a future video, we'll go into my calculation for that to determine the profitability of an individual procedure. But we're just looking at a big picture here. So yeah, sure, if you raise your fees, then you are going to be taking home more gross income and therefore hopefully taking home more net income. It's one of the strategies. Another is to increase your patients. So maybe you spend some money on some marketing or whatever initiative you have to bring in more patients to your practice. If you bring in more patients, then you'll be doing more procedures and more production. Makes sense so far, right? Next, we can expand the scope of our services. So let's just say we have the same number of patients, 1,500, 2,000 patients in our practice. Let's just start offering them more things beyond just cleanings and fillings and restorative dentistry. Maybe you decide to take a sleep apnea course. Maybe you decide to do more endo and not refer out endo as much. Maybe you decide to place implants, not just restore them. Those are examples of expanding the scope of services. And usually that requires you to spend a little money up front to be better trained in some area. But then ultimately, yes, you're able to provide more services and increase your gross income. And finally, a strategy that I think is really interesting is to just improve your efficiency. So you're paying to keep the doors open for a certain number of hours a day. If you can just bring more dentistry, do more dentistry in those set number of hours, be more efficient, then you are going to improve your gross income. This, I think, is one of the least recognized and most successful ways to improve your gross income, is do quadrant dentistry. Use materials and technology that free you up to do more dentistry and not just, and decrease your downtime. Next, the other strategy for increasing gross income is to just improve your collection. So doing the same amount of dentistry, how can you collect more money? Well, unfortunately, just because you do dentistry doesn't mean you get paid for it. And so we have the always nagging accounts receivable, or AR, and we're owed money in two ways. We're owed money by patients, and if you accept PPOs in any capacity or other insurances, then you have accounts receivable with those third-party payers, public or private. And so there's a host of strategies that we'll be discussing in an upcoming video about improving your accounts receivable. Just collect more that's owed to you. And then the second section there is decreasing adjustments. If you are working with PPOs in particular, then there's a whole host of things that can happen to what is owed to you. Adjustments include offering discounts to folks. It's all of the things that you do to decrease or sometimes even increase the money that's owed to you. A finance charge or late fee is an example of a positive adjustment. You actually make more money than you expected to make. But in general, it's a good practice to just have minimal adjustments. You want to just get paid as cleanly as possible the money that's owed to you. And finally, a strategy for improving net income is to decrease your line item costs. So that's pretty darn self-explanatory. Decrease your expenses. And we'll get into this in an upcoming video. What are some of the ways you can do that? But this is a good time as any to just break down our expenses into two categories, fixed and variable. A fixed cost, a fixed expense, is one that does not change regardless of how many patients you see in a day. If you were to see 10 patients a day or 20 patients a day, that doesn't matter as far as your rent is concerned. That doesn't matter as far as your staff is concerned. You're paying your staff by the hour, and you're paying your landlord the same amount every month, right? So those are considered fixed costs. Variable costs are ones that do change based upon how many patients you see. So an example would be your supply costs or your lab bill. And we looked at all of these different categories in the prior videos of overall overhead. Now here's the thing. Fixed costs are very hard to change. Variable costs are easier to change. It's hard to go to your landlord and say, yeah, I paid you $4,000 in rent last month. I'd like to only pay you $3,500. That's not an easy thing to do, to renegotiate your lease, right? Good luck with that. Variable costs, on the other hand, are easier to change. You can use less expensive materials. You can go to your laboratory and say, hey, I've been paying you this much for a crown. I want to keep my business with you. You do great work. Is there any way that we can, negotiate some sort of discount for the volume of business that I give you? That's not necessarily an easy conversation to have, but it's a heck of a lot easier than getting out of a contract you have with, say, your landlord, or going to tell your staff that you're going to be paying them less. So those are the broad strategies for improving profitability, increasing your net income. And in the next couple of videos, we'll dive deeper into specific examples.